First, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is to prep everybody for Mr. Cook's affirmation of my introduction of Sarah Graber. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity for us to present the budget for the general fund and also the capital funds budget. We've been working very diligently on this, but I think that we've also all been closely watching what's taken place in the past legislative session. We are not a district that is positioned to do much above and beyond what is provided and what is passed by the budget by the lawmakers in Tallahassee. We don't have any sort of discretionary millage, those types of things. We go with what we're provided. There has been a decrease in the allocation that's been provided by Tallahassee. We have to account for that. We have to balance our budget every year, and in doing that, that means that hard decisions have to be made. We need to make sure that we maximize the resources that we have, and if we have resources that are not working for us, we go ahead and we take the corrective measures. We went through the initiative inventory process this year. That was new for us in order to find greater efficiency and try to get ahead of what was coming. What we know is that there is an increase in funding per pupil, but a lot of that increase in funding is set aside for the family empowerment scholarships. That was the decision that was made by lawmakers in Tallahassee. Those are not decisions that are made around this table. I think that that's a very important distinction. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Graber and Mr. Gonzalez, who have worked very, very hard on this budget. They are very skilled at what they do, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Graber at this time.
All right. So what you have in front of you is the packet that you're used to seeing for this stage of the game, and we'll talk through the timeline. But this is just a workshop today. No action is being taken on the budget for next year at this point. And this is just your general operating fund and your capital fund. So wanted to provide the information on where we are, what we've pulled together so far, get some feedback from the board, and then next steps will be to put together the full all funds budget and come back and present that next month. So if you go ahead and flip to, or you can get that, if you go ahead and flip to page, I-2 is the budget timeline. This talks through the whole budget cycle starting back in March at the beginning of legislative session. As we know, we had an extended session and just recently, last week, received the FEFP conference report, still awaiting the governor's signature. We're here today, June 24th, at this workshop to present our initial drafts of the general and capital funds. Then on July 1st, the property appraiser will certify the tax roll. So we have the estimated tax roll baked in right now. We have on July 15th at that board meeting, we will be presenting the all funds budget, again, as an informational item only. So no board action will take place on July 15th. And then July 29th and September 9th are the two required public hearings. So that's when you all will actually adopt the tentative budget and millage and then the final budget and millage. The next page is just a graph showing our growth over time in our student population. So our unweighted FTE increases. For next year, This is projected to be a 3.19% increase, taking our total FTE in Osceola up to 84,955.
And this includes
all
all students?
Yes, so our traditional students in our
Oh,
traditional schools, charter and family empowerment scholarships.
Okay.
And then the next page, I-4, we start to break that number down. So this is where you can see the breakdown. For those in the audience, I know it's a little bit hard to see the graph, but the big blue chunk at the bottom is our traditional student population. So it's actually grown about 4,000 over the last 10 years. So we are one of the districts that is at least continuing to see growth still in our traditional schools. The green section above that is our charter schools. So we can see our charter school growth. And then the orange section at top is family empowerment. So that's where you can see the family empowerment growth that has happened in recent years. We did used to have McKay in there too. McKay was rolled into family empowerment in 2023, so that's why you don't see that separated out anymore. Then the next page, I-5, is just showing this presentation differently. So this is taking the total of 100% and breaking it down as a percentage basis in those same categories. So showing as a percentage of our district, family empowerment growing and traditional going down, and charters have also grown over the 10 years, although we're not projecting a lot of growth there anymore.
The growth there too, is some of that also attributed to just more charter schools in our community from 10 years ago till now?
Yes.
Or is it an increase in population? What do you think it's more of?
Most of that's additional charter schools, yeah. And then charter schools that have started, as they start up, typically they'll add a grade each year.
So more opportunity for charter.
Yeah, more charter seats.
Yeah.
Moving on, page I-6 and I-7 is still your FTE projection compared to the current year, but broken down by all of our individual schools. So you can look at each school individually along with our grade segments. At the bottom of the first page is the total for traditional. So you'll see our projection moving into next year is growth in our traditional schools of 480. And then if you flip to the next page, we're also showing growth in our charter schools of just over 400 and growth in the voucher family empowerment program of 1,500. We have a little bit held back as undistributed, which just means we haven't actually assigned staff for those students until we see where they show up.
And then our biggest shifts, the ones showing at Neptune and Middle and K is with Cross Perry opening. Is that why?
Yeah.
The biggest decreases in those schools? And we haven't estimated we have Cross Perry on here as a.
Yes, it's line 52.
Okay, sorry.
So yeah, I just want to point out, due to the growth that's happening in our county, we are still seeing growth in all three of those educational segments. The next page, I-8, is the preliminary tax roll that we received from the property appraiser on May 28th. Again, this is just the estimate at this point in time, which was lower than what was used in the conference report that came out of the legislature. So this was slightly lower, although when we get the certified roll on July 1st, we do expect it to go up and be a little bit higher than this. And that won't directly impact the money that we receive, it just will impact the amount of money that is generated locally versus what we get from the state in the overall FPMP number. And change our required local effort millage percentage. So that's kind of how that balances itself out. Next page, I-9, again, just including some historical information for you. This is showing our millage rates over time, along with the tax levy, and then the graph is of the tax roll. Couple things right now, the required local effort rate is set at 3.043, but again, that will get adjusted once the tax rolls are certified and the second count comes out in July. Tax roll that's in here was a 7.75% increase. Actually, I think that's probably the number that was in the conference report. That 63 billion. And then the tax levy total 6.7% increase for next year. The next page, I-10, this is the comparison of the actual FEFP or Florida Education Finance Program funding broken down. The first column is the third calc for the current year, fiscal year 2025. You guys all know what's going on, but typically at this point in the year, by June, we would have had the fourth calc released, and so we would actually know close to what our final numbers are for the current year. Since that has not happened yet, what's reflected here and what was reflected in the conference report is still based on third calc data, which is really based on our student counts from last October, without any information or updates for what happened in our schools during the second semester.
And there's no
The update is we'll get back to you as soon as possible. There's a delay. So yes, we'll talk about kind of where we are with closing out the current year. There are always a lot of things that happen between end of June and mid-August before we really have the year closed out. But the lack of a fourth calc is another big unknown right now. So again, this page is showing you current year compared to the budget for next year, the 2026 conference report. Couple of numbers to highlight. Line 15, the base student allocation. See, that's going up by $41.62 or 0.078%. And the base student allocation is really where all of our funding comes from for annual inflationary increases, cost of living increases, what we pay salary increases out of. So any dollars that are coming down through the FEFP program that are not specifically designated or set aside in one of these other categorical areas like mental health, transportation, safe schools, etc. So that amount in the base is just going up by 0.78% per student. Then as far as the specific categoricals, I think where we landed was no change. These are our numbers for Osceola, but essentially safe schools and mental health were no increases statewide. So the small increases that you see here are really workload increases due to more students. So these are tied to, it's not necessarily more funding being put into the system, it's just we have more students, so we're getting that growth. Line 26, I'll call out academic acceleration options. That is the new categorical for the AP, IB, industry cert programs. So that all of that funding was handled differently in the past. It was add-on weighted FTE, which effectively showed up in the base. Now that has been carved out and it's a specific line has been set aside. So for Osceola, that amount is $9.7 million. And there are new rules related to how that money has to be spent, what it can be used for, etc. Let's see. So if you drop all the way to the bottom, the total dollars per FTE are increasing by $153 or 1.79%. And again, this includes family empowerment, and this includes the new money that has been specifically designated in these other areas. No questions, and move on to the next page. I-11, again showing a little bit of a historical perspective on our total funding and funding per student. So you can see that the total funding increase, but really since we've had so much growth in our student population, what's really more relevant is the funding increase per student. So you can see that there at the bottom, how that has increased over the last several years. The next page, I know the board has always liked to look at this, so we continue to include this in here.
We're back.
We are holding steady at 66 out of 67.
What was the highest number? And it was like 60 at
The highest we
Yeah.
got to at one point.
Yeah.
I think for like a split second,
Like a
we were
year.
at 61, but
61,
basically
yeah.
we've been between 64 and 66. Hendry's just below us. You can see that dollar amount's significantly different from the ones above, and that has to do with their heavy virtual population. So that's why Hendry's down there. But other than that, most of the Central Florida districts are always going to be lower. This has a lot to do with property values. So the ones you'll see that are getting more per student, either they're the coastal properties that have high property values. They're also your smaller districts that when you look at it on a per student basis, it's gonna, as a percentage, it's gonna be higher. So the ones that are closer to the top are your small districts and your property rich districts. Okay, so that was some introductory information. Now moving on to the general fund. Page 1-2 is kind of a full snapshot of our general fund budget on one page. So at the top, you'll see the beginning fund balance. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but we are projecting to end the current year and move into next year at that $84.2 million number for total general fund balance. Then you have all of the revenues coming in by major category. So the FEFP that we just discussed, which includes our local tax dollars, the class size reduction money, and then line 13 is transfers for capital projects. So we'll talk a little bit more about that also, but there are facilities and maintenance operations, rental of portables, property casualty insurance. There are certain things that have to be charged to the general fund that are operational in nature, but it is allowable to reimburse yourself through capital. So we've done that. We've had a strategy around that for several years. Which changes over time, given what's going on in the financial picture of the district and K-12 in general. But part of our proposal and part of what is built into this budget now is to reimburse the general fund at a greater extent than we have in the past with our capital dollars. So that's where you'll see that reflected in here coming into the general fund, which is what's allowing us to maintain this balance. I do just want to point out at the bottom of the page under the appropriation section, so our biggest expense, obviously, salaries and benefits. You'll see here it's listed at 63%, but the line right below that is our charter schools. So all the money for our charter schools comes into the school district, and then we pass that through to the charters. So that's what you're seeing reflected there. Keep in mind, most of their budgets are also salaries and benefits. So the 63% is kind of not painting an accurate picture. Most school district budgets are around 80 to 85% salaries and benefits. If you drop down to line 45, I do just want to point out carryover appropriations. So So what this represents, this is essentially money where we have budgeted for something. We've taken the dollars, we've assigned them for a specific purpose, but the cash isn't actually going to go out the door. We're not really going to receive those goods and services until after June 30th. So effectively, that money that has been set aside for that purpose is rolling forward into the next year's budget, and that's what we call those carryover appropriations. So you'll see $34.8 million there. That's our forecast. That's essentially things like your textbook adoptions. We've committed that money, but we don't receive, if it's not received until July or beginning of August, then that's when we'll actually make those payments. So all that money has to be set aside. That also includes any other contracts that we have in place that are ongoing service contracts. So it's really a combination of that and the projected ending fund balance on this page that reflects where we think we will end the following year. This isn't saying that we think we're going to draw everything down by $35 million. And if you flip to the next page, you can see that. So page 1-3 is our long-range forecast for the general fund. If you look at the 24-25 year, that's where we think we're going to end this year. I do just want to go back and remind everyone, when we started the year, the budget that this board had approved back in September, there was a plan to spend down fund balance by $10.4 million. So after we received all of the ESSER and ART money the past couple of years, and we built fund balance up slightly, the plan was to spend 2 or 3 years kind of dwindling that down a little bit so that we didn't have to make massive cuts all at once. So going into this year, the board's budget was a reduction of 10.4. What we have in here now is that 8.3 on line 5 for the 24-25 year. So we think where we will end the year, and with doing more of those capital transfers even in the current year, we can get to this point where we will maintain the fund balance at the level that this board has expected. And so you'll see that very last line at the bottom, financial condition ratio. This is what, when we talk about the fund balance percentage, the state requires us to have 3%. And the board has a minimum of 6. This is the percentage that we're talking about. So we went into the year at exactly 9.0%. Based on this right now, we would end at just below that, on an 8.9. And then the budget that we've built that's in front of you today for the 25-26 year, we essentially built a totally break-even budget. If you look, you'll see on lines 3, 4, and 5, revenues and expenditures are equal with a 0 for surplus or deficit. And because we're still growing, the percentage of fund balance has to grow along with that, or the amount has to grow along with that in order for the percentage not to drop. So by just breaking even, it will drop our percentage from 8.91 to 8.67, which is still in the range that we want to be in. And then in those out years, we've kind of maintained that same level, keeping in mind that in the out years there are plenty of variables that will continue to change between now and then. The next 2 pages are very small, but this is all of our line items. And we've included a comparison in here for you to the prior year and to where we think we're going to end the current year on these. So we have gone through this several times and looked for things that we can do differently, repurpose. So there's not a lot of change in total. But there are definitely things in here that we have discontinued, repurposed, and then some new things that we have to add as we move forward. The main thing that you'll see, the main change is we are gonna be changing how we handle our substitute budget. So we have spent a lot of money, this year, on excess substitutes, and by carving that out of here and handling that differently, we think that'll help control that spend.
Are there any other highlights that you wanna provide of like the things that we've looked at differently?
Great question. I didn't look through that. Yeah, those sub budgets are really at the top right there.
So when we say we're handling the subs differently, can you expand a little bit more on that? I know we've talked about it, but I don't know if everyone understands.
Yeah. So what we're going to be doing is we have centralized payment of substitutes. We haven't necessarily set criteria on how substitutes are to be requested. Basically, it's just whenever a school needed a substitute, they would put in for it. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's a teacher absence, but they put in for requests. What we wanted to do is we wanted to look at the historical teacher absences of employees that generate a substitute. Let me clarify that. Absences of employees that generate a substitute, and determine what that average is. Then look at appropriating those funds to schools, keeping in mind that there are going to be certain situations where you have an employee maybe going out on FMLA or extended leave, those types of things, which those are really exceptions to the rule. So we still go ahead and we take care of those. It's not out of the same pot of money, but what we want to do is on the 1 day or the 2 days when somebody happens to be out, we want to give schools control over those sub budgets. The idea being that if we know that we've got somebody who doesn't generate a sub out, but we want to use somebody who does generate a sub to cover for the person who doesn't generate a sub, and then pay for a sub that way, those are things that we need to start to rein in. These are things that we just cannot afford to do anymore. Cost of substitutes is significant. Doesn't matter how we do substitutes, the cost of substitutes is rising. Knowing that, we feel like this is the best approach. If you look at other school districts, this is the approach that they take as well. Very few districts just open things up as we have, and we have seen that when you open things up, you get no control over the oversight, how that's being done. Got to bring that in a lot tighter. So then we're only providing substitutes for those that actually generate a substitute. And looking at that historical leave data, we're able to go ahead and make those allocations.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just a few other things that did change to your question. So the computer repairs and leasing program, that is baked in here now. So instead of just paying out the cost of all those repairs, the cost of the leasing program with repairs and refresh built in is now reflected in here. And that is being funded through capital as well. So that's one of the big ones. And then there's several things related to professional development. We have also taken a closer look at what we're doing in the area of professional development. and we're gonna scale back, some things to make sure that we're not overburdening our operational dollars. So we do receive the Title II grant, where we can charge most of our instructional PD, but we're gonna take a closer look at what's really hitting our operational budget outside of that.
Remind me of who was the consultants who are looking at all of our the recurrent expenses and making sure that we are using.
For the initiative inventory thing
Yes,
that
yes.
was that, district management group.
Okay. So any of the savings is not reflected on this budget because they're not done, right?
It is.
It is.
It is.
Okay.
Yes, and it's where you're not gonna see it as like one thing.
Yeah.
It's gonna be things that have been taken out of line items, things that have been taken out of EEA, which is old SAI, things that are no longer gonna be spent in grants. So it's reflected, depending on what the funding source was, that's where you'll see it eliminated in here, a reduction of funding allocated for those purposes.
And we're gonna have a report sent to us so that
It
we
was.
can. It was.
Yeah, I emailed it to you yesterday,
Yeah.
the full
I
file,
will-
so have fun
My
with that
computer, I will look at
massive
that.
spreadsheet.
Thank you.
And yeah, of course, once you guys have a chance to look at that closer, we can talk if you have specific questions.
Thank you.
I think that was all on line items.
Can I ask a question? So for bus monitors, it has nothing set there as recommended.
Yes, was this somebody remind me, was this the hub sites or choice hubs? So we're gonna handle that differently. What was the story? I'm trying to remember
It's under
what the
school
story was.
operations.
I don't know why the recommended was held back.
I think we had a conversation about that.
We'll go through it.
Those are OPS contracts for staff to supervise students as they arrived and departed from the choice hubs.
Oh,
So we just talked about doing that differently and eliminating the need for an OPS contract.
So the fact that we provide transportation for certain choice schools, is that the ones like
Right.
Neo City, OXA, stuff like that? And then the
Give her a
one,
second.
sorry, under the teaching, leading and learning, the math supplemental, there's no recommendation there.
No, math instruction. I don't remember what specifically that was, but did we move it into SAI? We'll have to look at the detail.
There was, that was the contract with Valencia to provide math instructors.
And they're not providing those anymore.
Thank you.
Oh, got it.
And yeah, if you guys have any specific questions on individual ones, just email or call me and we can always look up the detail. Okay, so the next page, 1-6, is the EEA, or what's now called Educational Enrichment Allocation. For those of us that still haven't gotten used to that, this is what used to be SAI, or the Supplemental Academic Instruction categorical. So this is that specific amount set by the state, which for us is the $20.2 million. So obviously charter schools get their share of that. And then this budget's breaking down for you, showing where we're spending those dollars. So we spend a good portion of that on salaries. And then starting on line 17, you'll see the individual allocations for the non-salary portion. I will say this has been looked at with a fine-tooth comb, and we have scaled certain things back. This is also where Some of the programs that we are eliminating through the DMG process were funded out of here or would have needed to be funded out of here if they were previously funded through the ESSER and ARC grants. So with those grants going away, there was a lot that either needed to be discontinued or would have needed to be maintained within either line items or this budget. So a lot of the stuff that we've just discontinued, that's where that's reflected. If that makes sense.
For line 18, other educational enrichment, that's just some of those supplemental programs that we use, or?
That's just the unallocated portion of the EEA funding. So the portion that's not in salaries, charter school related to other programs currently.
Like a glimpse.
It's a small reserve.
No,
That's
this
basic.
is separate.
That's really just the net reserve.
Correct.
Was there anything, Dr. Shannon, was there anything you specifically wanted to talk about?
No, not particularly. So it's just, this again is kind of reflective of having to live within our means. Yes, so we, this is us sitting with teaching and learning and really going through and keeping what we know has worked and what hasn't worked. Unfortunately, it's been a tough conversation, but we've had to make some tough decisions. So, but we feel like of the tough decisions that we've made, I don't think that we have at all kind of changed the identity of what the teaching and learning and leading program looks like within our district. Everything is still focused around that teacher and that student. And we can't program our way to results. It just comes back to good instruction. I think that that's really where we've decided to prioritize.
When looking at some of these, from 17 down are non-salary program allocations, but so like, just for example, like summer reading camp, that's just whatever it costs to run summer reading outside of salaries, outside of what we're paying teachers.
So some of this is additional OPS contracts.
Right, it would be OPS.
Okay, so it could be
Yeah.
salaries,
Yep.
but just
Yeah,
for
so
OPS.
it's,
Right.
this would be if they're 10-month employees, it's not really in their salary, it's an
Okay.
OPS contract,
Correct.
it's reflected here.
Okay.
Alright, so next, page 1-8 is the mental health allocation. Again, specific pot of money that the state establishes for us to use for this purpose. And we are getting $4.6 million in this allocation in new funding. Again, once you carve out the charter schools allocated share, it's 3.6, and we have that all allocated towards salaries. The next column is the estimated carryover, so we do have a balance, which we're actually still in the process of kind of cleaning that up for the current year. But we are gonna ensure that we're using that balance to fund some additional positions next year.
And it's all positions around mental health.
I think you see the three.
Has to meet the letter of the grant.
Mhm.
So it has to qualify. Dr. Barrio has done a really good job of creating those parameters for us and indicating what can be paid for and what can't be paid for out of that.
Is the carryover due to when the funds are allocated, or is it just real true carryover that we did not use?
True.
Okay.
And a lot of that is positions being allocated and then they're not able to be filled. Oh, God.
If that were to happen again, like, so we have it allocated and the position's not filled, how else could those
Yes,
resources
so
be spent?
you can
then?
spend it on non-salary, and we do have 300,000 allocated for contracted services and other non-salary. What we discussed is that we need to kind of be monitoring that mid-year if we see that, funds are not being spent, shift to Plan B and make sure we're putting those dollars to use with some of the other things that we're doing.
Is there anything that can be, is there any part of that that can shift into some kind of special recruiting efforts too, though, for filling those positions? Or, I don't know if there's something out there that can help recruit people in those specific areas that would cost something, and could it be used for something like that?
That's a good question. I'm not sure what the exact rules are.
We would need to figure out whether or not that would qualify as an allowable expense. Kind of looking through what we've seen from the grant, I don't think it is, but we can certainly check.
And we still have to file the mental health plan with the state,
Yeah,
right?
they
We're
have to
still
approve it.
You guys still put together an actual
Right.
plan for how we're
Yeah.
gonna spend those dollars that the state has to approve. All right, so the next allocation is for safe schools. And as you know, that's how we're funding our SRO program. So again, we have this schedule reflected. The first column is the new money allocation for next year. Just under $6.5 million. It's closer to 5 after the charters, and then we actually have broken down for you here all of the SRO salaries by school, so you can see how that is being allocated. If you flip to the bottom of the next page, you'll see the other initiatives or the non-salary portion. So the first column is spending all of the allocation we get from the state. The next column, which we've labeled supplemental safe schools line item, that's what we're spending in the safe schools area above and beyond the specific allocation from the state. So you can see those programs there where we've allocated dollars to. Another 656,000. Actually,
Is this guardian equipment?
yeah, I was just
or-
gonna say, we discussed that yesterday. We're not doing the guardians. So
Okay.
that, yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
thank you for
Lester
that.
actually said that could be removed, so that's the one thing we didn't get out of here for this version.
And so where do those
So
funds
that'll free up that 22,500. So that will actually reduce the line item, since this is additional line item funding, it'll reduce that line
that
item.
much? Okay.
Help me understand just a little bit, so, and I'm sorry if this is apparent to others. This is above and beyond the allocation that we're getting.
So yeah, so if
So
you
where
look-
is this coming from?
the line items, which is essentially just your other unrestricted general fund
Unrestricted
dollars.
general funds, thank you.
Yeah. All right. That is the general fund. Moving on to capital. I'll go ahead and take you to page 2-3. 2-2 is just a summary. And then we have that broken down for our 5-year capital plan. First page is our capacity projects. So this is where all of our impact fee revenue comes in, which is used to create additional capacity or where we build new schools, wings, additional student stations. So it's effectively our impact fee budget. These aren't numbered, but you can see at the top, the revenues projected at $71 million. So we've set those forecasts based on what we're bringing in currently and working with our business advisory board on their feedback and expertise, what they see coming down the pike. They work with us to help set what our forecast should be for both impact fees and sales tax. So that's where we set those revenue amounts for in this 5-year plan. And then we have in this budget, obviously finishing up our new AAA high school. The additional dollars for that project are in here with that school opening next August. And then we have the next 3 K-8s shown as being funded in this plan, so with with one opening in August of 27, and then 28, and then 30. So that's, as we know, things tend to change over time, but that's what's reflected here and funded here right now. We will be, I'll go ahead and just mention the study, we will be kicking off our next impact fee study next month. So that, depending on what comes out of that study and rate changes moving forward into the future, that would obviously change the forecasted revenue. The next page is our 5-year capital plan for non-capacity, which is essentially everything else that's funded out of capital. And the revenue sources here are our 1.5 mil capital outlay ad valorem tax, bringing in close to $90 million a year now. And then our 2 sales tax. So the half penny is close to 45 million, with the quarter penny being half of that. So you'll see those revenue sources there in the top section. And then as far as the appropriations, we have this broken down into different sections. So recurring projects, we allocate some money to the high schools for athletic facilities. The charter capital money is in and out here, I guess passed through to them. We have we have money set aside for our ERP system, as the board is directed to start setting aside those dollars over several years. We have a balance that, because we've been setting those dollars aside for 3 years already, so we do have a balance along with continuing to add to that. There's money set aside for health and safety, for portables, and then we have 2 lines in here. So cyclical capital renewal is really what we call sort of the pot of money for projects as they pop up, as needs pop up through the year, as schools request things that aren't necessarily on the facility condition assessment, on a deferred maintenance list, but just capital projects that become necessary or are intended for something that, you know, a new need or desire. So we've set aside $5 million for that. Deferred maintenance, we have set the budget at $30 million. This is where we have talked about that is nowhere near the amount to meet the needs of the backlog that we have on our facility condition assessment. We've been, the last couple of years, especially since we've had the sales tax program, we've been trying to do 25-ish, so we know we're trying to ramp that up. So we've set that budget right now at 30, which, based on the priorities for that funding, is really only going to be a handful of major HVAC projects. So that's where that'll get funded. Safety and security, we've set that capital budget at 8.5, which is right around kind of where our needs are in that area. School buses, we have been investing $7.5 million per year for our bus replacement or refresh cycle. We are gonna pause that for 1 year. Mr. Noble has assured us that our fleet is in good shape, and we can reprioritize those dollars for 1 year and not make any new bus purchases for this upcoming year.
But those funds are reallocated just within capital.
In capital,
It have to.
yeah.
Right.
This is also where we're funding our student computers, both under our old model and under the new leasing model. And then another $13.5 million for technology infrastructure projects, cabling, and we have all the detail included. And then White Fleet we also have in here, the budget set aside for that. So those are the recurring projects that are typically funded out of all of these non-capacity capital dollars.
Would you help me understand with the student computer lease, I see for 25-26, we have 4, and then it goes down. What's the initial investment Is there an initial investment that we're not doing?
Hang on, let me make sure I know
After
what you're.
26, 27,
She's
student
jumped,
computer lease?
she's jumped down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
She's jumped down
I'm sorry.
to transfers to general fund.
Oh, okay, so that is a great question, unless we did two, I'm not sure if there's two cycles built into this number. Okay,
Oh,
that may be what it is. But no, thank you for highlighting that, we will check on that and figure out what that really needs to be. So, yeah, just going up a little bit, I just wanted to point out the renovation and remodeling projects. As you know, Oxa and Reedy Creek are the two that are in play right now. So those were previously funded in the prior year. Those budgets are sitting down and carry over. And then the 8.275 is an additional that we're needing to add to the Oxa project, which we've already discussed with the board. That's already, we're not increasing it again. It's just that money's, instead of having added it this year, it's being added in next year's budget. And then, of course, the PM Wells project, we will be adding an additional $4.5 million related to the renovation of that campus to bring that up to code and do what we need to do with it moving forward. The other line, which is blank in here right now, but Boggy Creek is the next comprehensive renovation on our sales tax project list. So that is been put on hold, and we will figure out at what point in time, working with Mr. Sharma and the team, based on funding and priorities and the board's desire, at what point in time do we want to go ahead and move forward with that project versus kind of continuing to put that on hold and focusing our dollars on some of the other capital needs.
Do you have any statutory limitations or obligations for the comprehensive renovations? What I mean is, if we put it on hold, we can only put it on hold for 1 year or 2 years, or that's an internal decision? Okay.
So the next section is the transfers to the general fund. As I discussed, we're ramping that up in order to make this budget work for now. So we have added some additional salaries in here that will essentially be reimbursing the general fund for where those salaries are incurred. Bus drivers was the big thing that changed last year. I think they changed the statute to, you didn't used to be allowed to charge bus drivers to capital, and now you can. So that gets us about $11.5 million there. Just keep in mind, by doing that, that's $11.5 million of capital that's not going to other capital needs. And the same thing with these other salaries. Then the next section is debt service. So this is obviously making all of our bond payments. I will point out that the first line, our COPS program, so historically, back before we had sales tax or anything else, or even a lot of the impact fees, this is where you used to be able to bond your 1.5 mil ad valorem dollars. So that was really the way that school districts issued debt in order to fund new school construction. So we've been able to tailor off of that, and this is actually very exciting. We're 3 years away from completely paying off all of that. So until the point in time that the board were to say, let's go ahead and actually finance new school construction, we wouldn't have anything else continuing on in that program for years. And then you'll see the debt service that's required on both our quarter penny bond issues and our half penny. So the financing that we just recently completed for Oxa and Reedy Creek, paying that back is now reflected in that sales tax revenue half-cent repay loans line item. And then again, the carryover section is everything that is already in current year budgets but just hasn't been spent yet, and the dollars will roll forward into next year. The last couple of pages are just the detail of individual sections within the 5-year plan. And these are the carryover portions, so again, with money that has already been allocated for these purposes, but projects that are still in the works and will carry forward into the next year. So we have safety and security, technology breakdown, cyclical capital, and then you can see the deferred maintenance projects that have all been approved and allocated. So, and we will have we'll have detailed lists of how we're planning on spending the new money as we move forward over the next month to include in the final budget for you. So, that is all we had here in the packet. Questions, comments, discussion?
Ask the questions as I went. Paula, I know you're feeling.
I
better not.
I worked on this with you.
Yeah, I do need to give our wonderful superintendent a ton of credit. I don't think he ever wanted to spend as much time as he had to spend on the budget this year.
It's important.
It was a journey for all of us. So,
But I will say, be happy that he made a lot of the tough decisions and I didn't. Because you don't want me making a lot of these decisions in a vacuum.
no. That is,
Cut everything. Just kidding.
yeah.
Thank you.
So, thank
So
you.
I
No,
just
that's
want to
good.
reiterate
you.
what you stated at the beginning of the meeting, and just for anyone that's here and for anyone watching at home, no decisions are made on the budget at this time. This is just part of our timeline, what we are statutorily required to do as we lead up to adopting and voting on the budget for this coming year. So this is just informational items, all of us take back, look at, continue to ask questions as needed, and we will still have more coming for the same opportunities. Moving forward, again, timeline was on page I-2. For anyone that wants to look at that and see what is coming. Action on any of this won't take place till July 29th and then again on September 9th. All right, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.